24, I got a phone call from my father. I had been and was living in Philadelphia, finishing up my master's degree in engineering. Then my father called, and he said, "You're still looking for work, right?" I said, "Yeah, that'd be good." He said, "You still thinking about teaching?" I said, "Yeah, but really, you know, I'm engaged to be married. I'm about to get a master's degree. I'm open, you know." And he said, "Well, there's this teaching job coming up back home." That's interesting. I was 24, and my father was, of course, much older, and parents don't know much, right? You know, like, well, you know, Dad, probably English, psychology. You know. He said, "Well," he said, "it's at FM." And I said, "Yeah, but they teach a lot of stuff there." And he said, "Well, it's about science and engineering." And suddenly I started to realize my father may be on to something. He said, "You're supposed to contact somebody named Pynadath." It was Dr. Pynadath. I think there was a lesson. I knew him as Mr. Pynadath. He was all about lifelong learning. Never bragged about it, but he had earned a doctorate since I was his student. Well, the long story short is that he hired me, and I use this very loosely, he hired me to replace him on the faculty. And you heard from Jack Cohn a minute ago, it really took two of us to replace Varghese, Jack and I both.
Neither one of us did a good job.
120 pounds, but talk about big shoes. Jack and I worked together as colleagues, and Varghese was our boss. He was the Dean of Liberal Arts and Sciences. And I could go on and on, but you've heard other people talk about how dedicated he was, what an innovator he was, what a leader he was. And as I joined the faculty on a full-time basis, a young 24-year-old, I modeled my teaching after his. And I remember when I was his student, he taught us that being a full-time student was equivalent to having a full-time job, but he demonstrated that being a full-time faculty member was a full-time job. And at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, he was usually there in his office, and he was usually working with students. And he was committed to campus governance, and he was engaged in worthwhile activities like the ones that others have shared with you. And he influenced me at that stage. When I was around 30, I think, maybe a little bit older, Varghese decided to return to the classroom. He had gone from being my boss to now being my colleague in the science division. It took me over a year to get the gumption to call him Varghese instead of Dr. Pynadath. As a colleague, he was respectful, supportive, and still a role model for me. As I describe this next stage, I bet you Varghese could have drawn a graph with intersecting lines and shaded area under the curve and all the kinds of things that scientists and engineers learn to do. But the fact of the matter is, our trajectories crossed in an interesting way. I made the move from faculty to administrator, and I became a dean here at FM, the Dean of Business and Technology, and later the Vice President for Academic Affairs. And Varghese was now in the faculty. And I guess you could say that I had become Varghese' boss, but in my notes I write that in quotes, that I was Varghese' boss, because I was still always tempted to call him Dr. Pynadath, a pillar of FM. Lots and lots of respect for him was in my heart and in my mind. And I suppose in some ways I did put him on a pedestal, and he may have at times seemed like an island. And even though he and I didn't associate much in our private lives, We didn't go out to dinner together or things like that, except campus events. I did catch an occasional glimpse of the private side of Varghese. I remember Joseph, David, I remember the first time I saw him bring you to scout camp at Woodworth Lake. What a shock to see him without his tan jacket and his necktie. I understand from my colleagues who spoke earlier how connected he was in other ways, and I read in the obituary about his work with literacy volunteers, international students, those kind of things. And you've heard from our colleagues about what a tremendous sense of humor Varghese had, and if you ever have been at a base retirement party, he was a true roast master, as you've heard, in ways that would make your eyes tear. On more than one occasion, I recall that Varghese's face would light up when he spoke of his children, David, Joseph, Elizabeth. Perhaps more than any other conversations that we had, he seemed to really become talkative on that topic. An island? Oh no. Ask not for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for all of us. For almost a half century, Varghese became forever connected to countless students and faculty like me. Engineers, scientists, technicians, teachers, citizens of the world. Mine is only one story. There are countless more. As much as we are diminished by his death, we have been even more enriched by his life.